Hi, this is Risa with Risa Kerbal Creative. I am excited to share with you 5 different ways to decorate the charcuterie boards for fall. These are in the seasonal section of Hobby Lobby and cost less than $2 when they're on sale. For the first one, I started by cutting off the tag and then tracing around on some scrapbook paper where I wanted my pattern to lay because I'm going to glue this to the front of the board. So I didn't do any prep work on the board. I just traced the shape onto the back of the scrapbook paper. The scrapbook paper is just, it's not a heavy cardstock, it's just the pattern paper found in the loose section of Hobby Lobby. So I just used a regular like felt tip kind of pin so I could easily see the line to cut around that shape. Now I'm not worrying about cutting right on top of the line because I will sand around the edges to smooth off any imperfections. So then after that, I just do a thin layer of matte Mod Podge. I pour it into that little cup to make it easier, and then lay the patterned paper on top and just rub it smooth with my finger. And then what I'm going to do once I figure out that it's laying the way I want it to, I had to adjust it just a tad bit to make sure it covered everything, is use a little mini iron to adhere and to make sure there aren't any bubbles. Then some fine grit sandpaper. This is 220 grit sandpaper. It's really fine, so I did have to work a little bit harder to get the edges off. You can use a rougher sandpaper if you prefer. Then the little scissors is what I use to like poke out that circle, and I just kind of drug that around and then use some sandpaper on top. These little pumpkins are also in the Hobby Lobby fall section in a bag of assorted sizes for a great price. I just used some chalk paint stain and then wiped off any excess to get the color I wanted. Then some thin ribbon, just looped that through the hole and tied a knot at the top for this one. Got it the length I wanted. I like to wait to cut my ribbon until after I know what length I want it to be, and then just tied a little loop, and this one is ready for the pumpkin to be glued. So I just used hot glue. That's the glue I just always prefer as a felt florist. That's what I use the most, so I always have it around, and I just kind of eyeballed it and just glued that pumpkin right onto the middle of this little board, and this one is finished. The second design, I am starting out by painting the charcuterie board. I used a Waverly chalk paint called Pool and did a couple of coats and then sanded it lightly after it dried with 220 grit sandpaper. And then I used this decal that I had cut out on my Cricut. It is in Cricut Design Space. It's just, I typed in fall leaf circle to find this and sized it down to fit the charcuterie board, and then used transfer tape to just line it up and smooth it on there. And I like this little tool for getting the vinyl to stick, then was able just to peel that right off. And I did have a little mistake at the top where one of the leaves kind of folded over, but the ribbon conveniently hides that. So this little bow is actually a fabric that I tore into a strip and then just tie on. And I did end up gluing the little ends of this ribbon with hot glue to get them to stay where I wanted them to stay. For this third design, I started out by painting the board a base coat. This is a wax from Waverly. All of the paint I use is Waverly chalk paint, and I just painted that base stain on the bottom layer. And because it's chalk paint, you don't have to do any prep if you don't want to. You can lightly sand it, but it's not necessary, which is really, really nice. Then I just wiped it off with a paper towel to get the color that I wanted. And this is when I applied the stencil. This is a mushroom that I cut on my Cricut using a design I found in Design Space, and I just cut this out on stencil vinyl. That's why it's blue, but really any removable vinyl would work just fine. This did peel up really well. After I put it down, I just did a thin layer of matte Mod Podge all over the board, and you could just do this over the stencil, but I wanted to use the matte Mod Podge to give a little bit of a crinkled effect once I painted over it. Then I dried that with my heat gun so that I could quickly do a layer of white chalk paint, and then I peeled, using this little Cricut tool, peeled off that vinyl to leave behind the stencil shape. And I didn't wait for it to dry to peel off, but I did wait for it to dry to sand. Then I added this little ribbon that I can use to tie it, and even if you, or use to hang it, even if you don't hang it, I like to put the ribbon down or tie the ribbon on so that it just kind of gives it a finished look. Chose the length I want and then cut the ribbon, and I finished with this mushroom. For this little Hello Pumpkin design, I painted the charcuterie board a green sage green chalk paint, and then after I finished getting I think this took actually only one coat. I was going to say after I did several coats, but I think I just did one coat because this color covered really well. I painted the pumpkin, and then this is a vinyl word that I just cut out on my Cricut, and this word I treated as a sticker. Really, I didn't use transfer tape like you're supposed to. I just peeled it off and stuck it on there. And then I used this ribbon and just tied it all the way around the loop at the top. So this one was really easy and simple, but I think this is my favorite, and it seems to be the favorite on social media when I posted these short reels. So this is a fun one, and the colors are really pretty together. For this last design, I got a little fancy, a little different design style, but I had someone specific in mind that I was making this for. I made a plaid, or cut out plaid vinyl. This is matte vinyl, so it doesn't show up shiny. It shows up almost like paint once you get it applied onto your board, which I really prefer that look. Then I sanded around the edges. Didn't know if that would work, but it worked just fine. Then I added some pom-pom trim and a black satin ribbon. And the reason I like this satin ribbon is because it kind of flowed and looped down really nicely. And this is the finishing touch for the last step of this 5th charcuterie board.